Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Janati Ravana Chari Janati Ravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Shtitira Sata Sri Srimad Chidandi Goswami Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya Shtitira Sata Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Govinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the Assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai Namaha Vishnu Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing our reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the third canto, and we're in the second chapter, entitled The Remembrance of Lord Krishna, and we're now on the fifth verse. You know what's better for me is it's 3, 2, 5. So if I go here to 3, 2, 5, then I can read it a lot better on this than I can read on 2. Okay. Pulakod bina sarvango monchan mila drushashucha punato lakshitas tena sneha prasara sampluta Pulakod vina sarvango Mungchan mila drisha sucha Purnato lakshitastena Sneha prasara sampluta Pulakod vina sarvango Mungchan mila drisha sucha Purnato lakshitastena Sneha prasara sampluta. Others? Go ahead. Pulakodvina sarvango Munchan mila jushasucha Munchan mila jushasucha Purnarto lakshitastena Sneha prasara sampluta. Ladies? Pulakodvina sarvango Munchan mila jushasucha Punato lakshitastena Sneha prasara sampluta. Pulakodvina sarvango Munchan mudlad skishasucha Purnata lakshitastena Sneha prasara sampluta. Pulaka udvina. Bodily changes of transcendental ecstasy. Sarva anga. Every part of the body. Munchan. Smearing. Milat. Opening. Drisha. By the eyes. Suchaha. Tears of grief. Purna arta. Complete achievement. Lakshitaha. Thus observed. Tena. By Vidura. Sneha prasara. Extensive love. Samplutaha. Thoroughly assimilated. I should be putting this thing on, right? 1 second. Here we go. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. It was so observed by Vidura that Uddhava had all the transcendental bodily changes due to total ecstasy. And he was trying to wipe away tears of separation from his eyes. Thus, Vidura could understand that Uddhava had completely assimilated extensive love for the Lord. Purport. The symptoms of the highest order of devotional life were observed by Vidura, an experienced devotee of the Lord, and he confirmed Uddhava's perfectional stage of love of Godhead. Ecstatic bodily changes are manifested from the spiritual plane and are not artificial expressions developed by practice. There are 3 different stages of development in devotional service. The first stage is that of following the regulative principles prescribed in the codes of devotional service. The second stage is that of assimilation and realization of the steady condition of devotional service. And the last stage is that of ecstasy, symptomized by transcendental bodily expression. The 9 different modes of devotional service, such as hearing, chanting, and remembering, are the beginning of the process. By regular hearing of the glories and pastimes of the Lord, the impurities in the student's heart begin to be washed off. The more one is cleansed of impurities, the more one becomes fixed in devotional service. Gradually, the activities take the forms of steadiness, firm faith, taste, realization, and assimilation, one after another. These different stages of gradual development increase love of God to the highest stage. And in the highest stage, there are still more symptoms, such as affection, anger, and attachment, gradually rising in exceptional cases to the Mahabhava stage, which is generally not possible for the living entities. All these were manifested by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the personification of love of God. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami, the chief disciple of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these transcendental symptoms displayed by pure devotees like Uddhava are systematically described. We have written a summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu entitled The Nectar of Devotion, and one may consult this book for more detailed information on the science of devotional service. Om Agyanathamrandasya Gyananjana Sakaya Chakshuramitam Tena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Mukum Karoti Bhajam Bangladaya Kriyapadamam. So here we are seeing the perfection of devotional service in the body of Uddhava, manifested in his body. These symptoms, Srila Prabhupada's first point to make here is that what we're seeing in Uddhava did not come about by some sort of artistic practice. There are schools for actors in which there is, I think it's the Stanislavski method or something. Method acting, you've heard of this? Anyone here has been you've been an actor, right? Called method acting. That you imagine yourself to be a certain person, and you practice
expressing yourself and acting as if you are that person. And the ultimate is that you actually lose yourself in the character, and the character manifests in you. And then the show's over. You go out and have a cigarette or whatever, something else happens. Sometimes there are actors who claim that they became so engrossed in the character that they had trouble coming back to who they were, or their so-called, original identities. This is our state in many ways. We have adopted characters. We've been given a script by karma. Karma has given us a particular script, a particular personality, a particular form, a particular environment to follow. And most people just go along with the script, and they identify fully with it. Uddhava was not acting. His expressions of ecstasy did not come out of some, backroom practice. Srila Prabhupada mentions this, I believe, to warn us about those who do think that by imitation, by imitating these ecstatic symptoms, they can experience them. They can rise up in some way. Or more likely, that by imitating these symptoms, they can get some fame, or they can get some, people following them. It hasn't happened so recently. Maybe Atita, you may remember times in Mayapur where we would come across a holy roller, as we would call them, a person rolling on the ground, in the temple generally, in front of the deities. And that's okay, because rolling, a type of dandavats, is actually performed by going from one side to the other and completely prostrating yourself. But these individuals added a few other dimensions of crying and wailing and other things. And generally, of course, you don't know, but it's told, and I don't know the provenance of this quote, so I can't verify it, but I've heard from some devotees that once, at least on one occasion, when such a person was demonstrating in this way, Srila Prabhupada advised that just go and give them a little kick. And if they are truly in ecstasy, they won't even actually notice it. But if they're a pretender and imitator, then they'll take offense and they'll get upset and they'll So this is going on, as they say. But in the case of Uddhava, this was the culmination of his awakening, his kripa, his flower, his bhakti lata. I wanted to actually, I was thinking I could get the screen and put it up. There's a beautiful painting of the bhakti lata, how it starts in the fertile ground of the heart of the devotee, and then springs forth and ultimately flowers. Beautiful painting, you can look it up on Google. The Bhakti Lata. But the Bhakti Lata progresses in different stages, and Srila Prabhupada describes those stages. And the stages of devotional service are interestingly presented in a variety of ways. We're all, most of us, I think, who've been studying and you've been in this society for some time. Alex, perhaps you haven't heard so much about the 9 stages of bhakti. Have you learned about that from Shraddha to Prema?
I think there's an yesterday's class.
You read about it, perhaps? Well, let's go through it. It never hurts. And I would like to introduce, because while we discuss this, because Srila Prabhupada discusses it in the purport, he summarizes it. There's also 14 stages. How many of you have heard and read about the 14 stages of bhakti? We know about the 9 stages. How about the 14? How about another 5? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur adds 5 stages. He keeps the same 9 and he adds 5 more. So we're going to look at that. And we're also going to look a little bit about how these stages of devotional service are initially represented in the Srimad Bhagavatam. How have you also, I had heard about the 14 stages in a class that I attended in the Govardhan retreat. You remember Adi Purush gave that presentation? It was very, very interesting. And I'm still wanting to get a hold of his PowerPoints for that. Because he not only discussed the stages of devotional service in terms of a progression, but he also discussed something that I think we're all familiar with, the roller coaster of bhakti life. How it appears that we initially begin and get a lot of enthusiasm, and we experience some joy and devotional service, and we go forward and we're going up, and then something happens. It starts to get difficult. We start to struggle with devotional service. And sometimes in that struggle, perhaps our enthusiasm comes down. We begin to get confronted with our anartas. And we begin to have to work through them. And that you could see it starts to become like, oh, wait a minute, and that can last some time. And then it starts to rise up again. And it's said that at a certain stage, it's like reaching the peak of a hill. And what they say, it's all downhill from here, where the progression of devotional life, of bhakti, proceeds with the energy, the force of a river flowing to the ocean. So the beginning, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, and we'll also discuss it, as I said, in the different relationships. So Srila Prabhupada begins here. First, he talks about 3 primary stages, 3 general categories, which roughly correspond, we can say this, the first category, which Prabhupada describes as the regulative execution of devotional service with regulation, and we know that as Vaidhi Bhakti. The execution, the practice. Here it is really practicing. We're advised to practice. Not to practice displays of symptoms, but to practice the 9 processes of devotion. Shrinvatam, the hearing, Shravanam, Kirtanam, to hear, to chant, to remember, to read scriptures. There, again, the Goswamis and our tradition generally likes to categorize things, right? And we get numbers of things. It's easier for us to understand and to embrace and to remember when we can put things in lists. I'm sure you all have that experience that when you want to try to remember something, you make a list. And then you'll go back and you'll prioritize your list, and this is number 1, this is number 2, etc. So the Goswamis give us lists. They give us outlines, things that we can more easily follow. So, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the original deliverer of these to Sanatana and Rupa, and they then compile them in their literatures. So we find Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu outlining the 64 angas of bhakti in his teachings to Sanatana. And then he describes that 5 of these angas, 5 of these practices, these are core. Those, my associate Gopal Bhatta, he likes to call them the big 5. In business world, there's big 5s of different kinds of companies and so on. So the big 5 for us is to chant the holy names of Krishna, Harinama, to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures, to associate with the devotees, Sangha, to worship the deities, Archana, and to reside in a holy place, to reside in the Dham, either the Dhams themselves or the Dhams that manifest when we dedicate that space, that place entirely for the service of the Lord. So these big 5 are there as our practices in the initial stage of Vaidhi. And then Srila Prabhupada describes that the next stage is when this is very nicely put here. The second stage is that of assimilation and realization of the steady condition of devotional service. So when these practices become second nature, when we don't come to, I've got to go to Mangalarti. The temple commander is going to get on the case. Maybe we used to, they don't do it anymore, but in some temples in the early days, if you didn't get up for Mangalarti, you skipped breakfast. How would that be? I don't think anyone here would be happy about that. But it was there. So it's not like, I gotta go. Or, gotta chant my rounds. No, it's, I gotta go. Let me run down the stairs. Get there. Be there for Radha Govinda. Let me chant. So when these practices start to become assimilated, as Srila Prabhupada has described here, assimilated and realized, when the knowledge, we hear, you're not your body, you're not your body, you're not your body, you're not your body. We hear it, you're not your body. But when we feel it, I'm not my body. When we see, we look and we feel, this is not me. We really feel it. When we realize, of course, we have to also say, I'm not my mind. That's a little more. You gotta really feel that too. And ultimately realize, I'm not this ego that I've acquired, the script that I got when I got born and got raised and was developed. So when we assimilate that, then we are in the Raganuga, the stage of bhakti. It still is Vaidhi. There's still what we would call the Vaidhi Raganuga stage. We're still practicing. We're still engaged in, but it's become spontaneous. It's become realized. This is Raganuga bhakti. And then things start to get amazing. Transformation starts to take place. What Srila Prabhupada describes is that it appears to me what he's saying here is that our spiritual bodies begin to manifest. Because he says that these symptoms of the highest order of devotional life, he's described, are manifested from the spiritual plane and are not artificial expressions developed by practice. So as the spiritual body itself starts to manifest, it starts to, and I think it was Natabara yesterday, someone asked a question, someone was asking a question, I was listening on the TV, about the air, how the elements of the body, how they get affected and they manifest, that the water manifests as tears and etc. I don't exactly fully remember. It's in the Nectar of Devotion describes how these different elements of the body, the pranas, the different airs, how the air, when the air of the life airs of the body being pushed now by the spiritual energy. The spiritual energy is pushing on the airs of the body, and when they come into connection with different elements of the body, they manifest different ways. And this is the last stage. So these are the general stages, but then both Rupa Goswami and Ado Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Vritti, Syat Tata Nishta, Tata Ruchi, Ashakti, Bhava, Prema. So these are the 9 stages that we're generally familiar with. That it begins with Shraddha, begins with faith. Faith awakens. That is the beginning in this list of 9. From faith develops the attraction, the desire to, and willingness to associate with devotees. And from that, the practices begin. Bhajana, we start to chant the holy names of Krishna. We start to practice bhakti yoga. And as we start to practice, then we start to run into the obstacles, the anarthas, that we have to clean from our hearts, anartha nivritti, through these practices. And when we sufficiently have cleansed them, not completely, it is said that even to the last stage of devotional service, there may be some anarthas. And we saw that, or we've seen it, in the case of Bharat Maharaj, who reached the stage of he was in Bhava, and yet there was some little anartha. that brought him into the attachment to the deer, and he had to progress through another couple of lives. But when that anartha, those anarthas are sufficiently cleansed, and we become steady, nishta. Our devotional life becomes steady, and out of that steadiness, everything becomes full of ruchi. We begin, we taste, we get that, what is it in the, that taste for which we're always hankering for, sadhana. We get the full taste, pratikshana, at every step. Pratikshana, how does it go? Well, in the samsara prayers, but in, it's funny, perhaps you have the same experience. I can recite the Shikshashtakam if I start from the beginning and go to, but if I want to pick out, the individual aspects, okay, Cheto Darpanam Marjanam, okay, Baba Mahadavagni Darpanam, and I've got to go through it. So what the taste for which we are always hankering, there is Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadhanam, Pratipadam Purnamrita Swadhanam, Pratipadam at every step. Pratipadam, at every step of our lives, Purnamrita, Swadhanam, we taste Swadhana, we have the taste of Purnamrita, full nectar, Ruchi. And from that, our Shakti, our attachment to Krishna becomes fully developed. And we begin to experience this bhav, which ultimately fruits in prema. Now, as you said, these are the 9 stages that we are familiar with. But as I said, Vishwanath Chakravarti gives us 5 more. Okay, now it's a little hard for me to read it, but okay. I believe this is from the Durya Kandambani. And I'm not sure. I'll just read the Sanskrit. If I can I'll need to get my light here. Just give me a second. Satam kripa. Satam kripa. Mahatseva. Shraddha. Guru padashraya. Bhajaneshu. Spriha bhaktir. Anartha pagamastataha. Nishta. Ruchir. Ata shakti. Rati. Premata. Darshanam Harer Madhuryanubhava Ityartha Syus Chatur Dashe. So what Vishwanath does is he adds 2 stages before Shraddha. Satam Kripa. First he says there is the mercy of great devotees. So this is what we all actually have experienced too. That before Shraddha comes in, there is 2 stages that take place. So the first one is receiving the mercy of great devotees, and then one engages in the service of such devotees. So, you devotees, especially the Yugadharma Ashram crew, you're out there giving mercy. You're giving the mercy your own. As devotees, you're giving your own mercy, and you're giving Srila Prabhupada's mercy. the mercy of great devotees. You're distributing. And you're engaging them in service. I think that's one of, I've heard from Vaisheshika Prabhu that, we generally always ask people to give us something because that engages them in service. Now they're engaged in some service. So they've received the mercy and they've engaged in some service. So in this, by going through these, then the opportunity for Shraddha to awaken is coming. If it doesn't come right away, it will come. So, one then engages in the service of such devotees. This leads to development of faith in the devotional process. Okay, so that is the Shraddha. After which one attains the shelter of the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. So, Sadhu Sangha in this respect is described by Vishwanath as Guru Pada Ashraya. And it's very important in this respect to understand and we don't have so much time to get into the tattva of Guru and to be able but we should appreciate that Guru manifests in many, many ways. It's not that when we say Guru Padashraya here, that we're speaking only of that personality who will ultimately initiate the devotee. We're talking about Srila Prabhupada. We're talking about all the other devotees who give shiksha. We're talking about Krishna himself within the heart. So, one then starts the process of bhajan. So we have bhajana kriya. After which one experiences a sincere hankering for devotional service. So here, Vishwanath inserts one more stage, which he calls Spriha Bhaktir. That as one engages, one's desire for devotional service begins to awaken. You begin to hanker for that devotional service. This is followed by anartha nivritti, removal of unwanted desires from one's heart. This leads to awakening of the stages of nishta, steady devotional service, followed by ruchi, genuine taste in such service, followed by ashakti, attachment to the Lord. After this, one experiences rati. Vishwanath uses the term rati instead of bhava, intimacy, and then develops prema, fully blossomed love for the Lord. And then Vishwanath adds two more. So if you can look forward. Because once prema manifests, then comes, one can then have darshan, direct perception of the Lord. Whence love of God, premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. When one's eyes become anointed, smeared with the anjana of prema from bhakti, then one has direct darshan. Direct darshan of Krishna. And it doesn't end. Vishwanath gives one more, and an experience of madhurya, comprehensive sweetness of the Lord. So we have these stages to look forward. And as I said, they're not purely linear. Okay, now I'm here, now here. It's something like, I've been trying in our service of chantnow.com. We have actually thousands of students. And most of them are still in the very, very beginning stages. But some are making progress, and we're trying to say, well, how do we assess that? How do we look at it? And we're realizing that it's not a linear thing. It's not like, okay, and although we like to talk about it in terms of steps, sometimes, going one step, next step, next step. I mean, steps go in order, right? You go from one step to the next, to the next, to the next. But I think it's more like college. When you go to college, right, you have to accumulate credits to graduate. You have to get so many credits in this area. You have to get so many credits in your concentration. You have to, and you can get credit for this, credit for that, etc. And when you get complete all the credits that you need, or maybe even more. Some people, they get more credits because they like this class or that class. They have dual majors, etc. And then you get a certificate. Right? And you get to go to the next stage. So that's an imperfect analogy. But just the idea is there, that these different stages developed, like ruchi begins to awaken even during bhajana kriya and the psalm. If you didn't get any ruchi, if you didn't get any taste from bhajan, you wouldn't do it. There's a stage where everything is just you're full, pratipadam purnamrita, every step, everything you do is filled with nectar. That we look forward to. And in the stage of nishta, there's still perhaps some anarthas. And of course, bhajana kriya, we're always practicing. And even shraddha, even faith itself develops deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper on the sharanagati, the path of surrender. So we hear about these stages to help us assess ourselves and to give us also great hope. Asha, what is it? Another symptom of is ashabandha, to have great hope. Because we can see that we're making progress. We should know that there are going to be difficulties, struggles. But we can see that every step, faith is challenged but built, challenged and built, strengthened, challenged, built. We get some taste, and then we fall kind of into the modes, but we remember that taste. And we go forward, hankering for it again. And we get more. And then the taste increases. And instead of, every month we got a little glimpse of something, maybe it's every day. We get some great joy in devotional service. And then maybe it starts to come more and more. It will come, not maybe, it will. It does, as we progress. And we can see that we're making progress and we're going forward, and the path is clear, and the rewards are extraordinary, beyond comprehension. Look at Uddhava. I mean, we were talking about it, you were giving the example yesterday of the Grand Canyon, right? That here we experience a little bit of the joy of devotional service. We get some, we jump up and down in kirtan, and, we're feeling, happy, and it feels great. But imagine, it's even hard to imagine when that love becomes so strong in our hearts that our whole bodies themselves become transformed Prabhupada describes the Mahabhava as being the ultimate of this transfer, and he also explains that this is, don't worry, it's rare for a jiva as us. Because I was thinking, I mean, how to even hold such, like you would say, the Grand Canyon can hold, seas of water. And what can we hold? We become overwhelmed sometimes with emotions. Often not the right emotions. But just imagine being overwhelmed, so overwhelmed with love, that our eyes begin to pour tears. I mean, occasionally I'm chanting and things are really, and then a tiny little, this much water comes out, and right. But imagine pouring. Imagine, I can't imagine it. In fact, I start to think maybe it'd be better to stay in Shantaras, where you don't get all that, right? Shantaras, I don't think they have all these ecstatic symptoms. But we're pulled forward because as soon as we get a little bit of a taste and we want more. And Krishna is bringing us closer and closer to Him, and He will increase our capacity. He'll increase our ability. He'll manifest, He will bring out our spiritual bodies. Yes, in this mind, with this intellect, with this body, we can't tolerate such intensity. But as we manifest our spiritual bodies, we'll be able to Anandam Bodhivardhanam. We'll be able to experience an ever-increasing ocean of happiness. Hare Krishna! Thank you. I'm sorry I've gone over time, so I don't think we should, unless there's somebody with a burning question that or Maharaj, if you have some comment you'd like to add.
No, not immediately.
All right, well, maybe next, when it comes. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, Srimad Bhagavatam. I never got to talk about, but look it up, okay? This is